Hey guys, welcome to another episode of Reels and Heels. Sorry, we have a dog over here that's acting like he's starving.
But he ate already today.
Yeah, he's a pig. Yeah.
Man, there have been some upgrades to that intro since the last time I was on.
Oh,
Yeah.
Quality.
That was nice.
Yeah, Josh Bauer created that intro. So we're on episode 40, and today we're joined by a very special guest. How do you pronounce your last name? Is it Quarry?
Yeah, just like a rock quarry.
Just like a rock quarry. Nathan Quarry, who's a former MMA fighter, fought on Ultimate Fighter in the UFC. We're also joined by Omar. Omar, welcome back, buddy.
Hey, guys. Good to be back.
And of course, our beautiful co-host, Willow, up in Canada.
hey everyone.
And I'm frisbee tossing chips at the dog. He's catching them too.
So today I had something else planned, but I reached out to Nate because I'm following his Kickstarter, which I followed the book for many years. Actually, I'm a huge fan of Kevin Smith, and Kevin Smith talks about this book a lot. I remember this book. Actually, you debuted it at Comic-Con in 2012, I think it was, San Diego Comic-Con.
Yeah.
And it was kind of like word of mouth. Like everybody was like, you got to check this book out. And now you got it in a collected edition, which I'm sure you're super excited about.
Dude, I can't tell you how excited I am about this. And before we jump to that, I got to tell my Kevin Smith story. So I was raised in a very religious, strict upbringing of the cult of Jehovah's Witnesses, which controls what movies you can watch, TV you can watch, music you can listen to, jobs you can have, friends you can have, even family you can associate with. But I was miserable. And I think I'm around 20, 21, and Clerks came out. Well, Clerks is rated R, so I'm not allowed to see it. But oh my God, did I want to see this movie. So under cover of darkness, I went out to the small theater in Salem, Oregon, bought a ticket, watched it by myself, and just laughed my ass off. Then fast forward a few years when I find my freedom, I leave the organization, and I start fighting in MMA. I make it into the UFC. I'm on the Ultimate Fighter, and I'm like, this is the time. I'm reaching out to Kevin Smith, and I'm inviting him to a UFC. So I hit him up every way that I possibly could. And finally, I get his email, and I send him an email like, hey, I'm Nate Quarry. I fight in the UFC. I'm fighting on this day. I'd like to invite you to the UFC. And he messages me back. And unfortunately, I'm not the best salesman because at this point, I'm like, well, they only give me 2 tickets. So it's only going to be me and you. And I can't afford to get you a flight or snacks or a hotel room or anything. But it'd be so cool if we went to UFC together. And then nothing.
Oh.
And then fast forward years later, I end up doing Kevin Smith's Comic Book Men on AMC. And I put on a couple fights with guys, buddies of mine dressed as Jay and Silent Bob. And I'm like, Kevin, man, do you remember this story? And he was like, yeah, that's weird, man. That's just really weird. But as I was writing the email to him, I remember writing all the stuff that crazy people write that sounds not crazy, because I'm like, dear Kevin, I promise you I'm not crazy. I'm just a big fan. That's what crazy people write.
That sounds like almost all my interactions with the people that on my podcast is like, I turn into the biggest fangirl, and I'm just like,
Yep.
Yeah. So before we jump into your MMA career and then later to the comic career, your upbringing, you said that you kind of were in a bubble, like you were basically told you could do this, you couldn't do this, and all that. And I think it was last year, the year before, we saw that documentary about that. It was on Hulu about
Lee Remini's show.
Yeah, I mean, it was interesting. So, can you explain your childhood? I mean, were you reading comics and stuff like that?
Somewhat. So, boy, where to begin? So, when people find their way into a cult or something like that, it's usually filling some kind of a need that they had. So my grandfather beat the hell out of my father. He was the classic story where my father is given the choice of going to jail or joining the military. So he joins the Navy while he's stationed in Italy. The Jehovah's Witnesses, who are famous for their door-to-door ministry work, knock on my parents' door. And it just so happens that they have answers that answer the questions that they have. And no, you've always had this loving father. He's just been up in heaven watching you, blah, blah, blah. And they always lead with the good stuff of you're going to live forever in a paradise on earth. All the animals are going to be loving. They don't go into the, well, if your children decide they don't want to be a Jehovah's Witness, then you disown them and you never talk to them again. So my parents converted before I was born. So I'm raised a Jehovah's Witness, which, as I said, you're not allowed to watch any R-rated movies. PG-13 movies are questionable. I knew some that wouldn't even watch PG movies. There was always conversations about the evils of modern music and how corrupting it is. Books were the same thing, and it wasn't that books are wrong, but it was always, have you finished reading all of the stuff that the Jehovah's Witnesses have given you that now you have time to read some of these worldly publications? And things like sports were completely forbidden, because then you're going to be associating with worldly people who are not Jehovah's Witnesses. And of course, you can't have any friends of the worldly people that aren't Jehovah's Witnesses. And if your family is not a Jehovah's Witness, then you can't associate with them as well. And they even control what kind of jobs you can have. Like, you could not be a police officer or work in certain things. Wow. So it's very controlling through your entire life. And as a young man who just wanted to go out there and explore the world and do stuff, and I was a nerdy little kid on top of it, had big, thick glasses, garage sale clothes. So I'm not really the guy drawing the crowds to me for association in the first place. So I become more of a loner, and then more and more angry as I'm seeing these dreams of mine slip away. And then in my early 20s, I was just so miserable, going to church 3 times a week. And I always tell people my childhood was Sunday morning, we're going to church from 10 to noon. So you have an hour beforehand getting ready, an hour afterwards being there. Sometimes you went out in the field service, the ministry work after that. Monday, I had school. Then Monday night, we had studying for the meeting we just had the previous day, the Sunday meeting. Tuesday, I had school. Tuesday night, we had another meeting that we had to study for. Could be a book study or a longer meeting. Wednesday, at school. Wednesday night, you're studying for the meetings as well. Thursday, school. Thursday night, you had a big hour and 45-minute long meeting. Friday, school. Friday night, you had studying again for more of the meetings. And then Saturday, you had the ministry work again. And that was before I was old enough to work. So as soon as I hit 13 or 14 and got my work permit, well, then I was doing either fast food, or I did janitorial for 2 years, or other manual labor things. So my childhood was just work and church and school and sleep. And that was really it. And in my early 20s, I start just looking at my life and seeing how unhappy I am and how miserable I am. And somebody points out this UFC, where he comes up and he goes, dude, there's these 2 guys beating the hell out of each other in a cage on TV. And my first thought was, well, who would do that? That's so bizarre. And to this point, I had never even watched boxing. I thought that it was too violent. I wanted nothing to do with it. And then I go inside and I see Ken Shamrock and Hoyce Gracie fighting. And what amazed me more than the athleticism and the skill that they showed was that at the end of the fight, they stood up and they shook hands. They even hugged.
That was a great fight. That was a great fight.
That blew my mind, because all of a sudden I was like, well, wait, this isn't violence. Violence is me getting smacked in the face for back talking or whatever the case may be. This is actual sport. And so I decided I'm going to start training in this in secret. because if anyone found out, I would be immediately blacklisted from congregation, what they call disfellowshipped. And over the next few months or so, I started to build a community with those people I was training with and creating friends outside of the Jehovah's Witness organization. And so when they said, when they caught wind of it and decided I was going to be disfellowshipped, excommunicated, I just said, you know what? I don't care if you guys do have the truth. I would rather die living my life the way I want to than continue on this pathway where I'm just miserable. And so they kicked me out and disowned by my family, and never spoke to any of the friends I grew up with ever again. I don't know anything about them. And so really kind of being dropped into the world in my early to mid 20s. And it's really such a bizarre thing.
It's like starting fresh, right? You know, starting over. It's like you're in a world that you sort of knew about, but not really.
It really is, because I have no frame of reference of so many things. And now, even as I'm 48 now, and I'm married and I have 2 kids, but I have a daughter from a previous relationship who's 21, and I have a son who just turned 1. So quite a bit of a spread there. But now with this wife and this baby and going down to my in-laws' house for Christmas, I've never seen anything like it. And I have to tell her, I'm like, is this how Christmas was for you as a kid? And seeing the grandparents on the floor with my son and playing and presents, and this unconditional love is completely foreign to me. It's just a very different thing. It's very welcome, and it's amazing. I can't believe I'm the recipient of it, but it's difficult to overcome, because we're all just a compendium of our life story. Our origin story is what gets us to where we are, and right or wrong, that's what brought us here. And for myself, that's what made me a survivor, got me to this point. That there's a lot of things I would like to change about myself, but man, that's the origin story. And if you're happy with where you're at, you can't bitch about the journey that got you there. And I'm definitely happy with where I'm at.
Yeah, I mean, it's a sad story, but it's also a happy story to see, you know, where have you gone. And
it's been tough. And you mentioned the Leah Remini show. She was doing a lot of episodes on Scientology. That's her show. She covers Scientology, the organization she was in. Well, when I first started training in MMA, there was a guy who joined the gym 2 weeks before me by the name of Robert Follis. And I kept hearing from everybody, oh, you guys would be great friends. You should hang out. He was raised a Jehovah's Witness too. And I was like, well, that's bizarre that someone else was a Jehovah's Witness and joined the same gym that I did and is attempting to find their freedom. And we did. We became best friends for 10 years. Had a little bit of a falling out, but we were coming back together. Where I took my childhood and everything and I let it fill me with rage and then found that outlet through fighting, he was still carrying a lot of the scars and trauma from his childhood and ended up committing suicide a couple of years ago. And
sorry to hear that.
I wanted people to know the backstory, because if you looked at him on paper, you'd be like, man, you've cornered multiple world champions all around the world in these UFC fights, in Pride. You've done seminars all around the world. Like, I remember him showing me pictures of him in Africa holding baby lions. He's got this incredible life, and he's working at one of the best gyms in the world, working with new champions and all of this. What was it that led him to suicide? And I wanted to tell the story of what it's like to be raised with conditional love as opposed to unconditional love, and how you just don't really have this basis moving forward. And kind of the running joke in my household, whenever I get frustrated about something or I'm trying too hard, I just say, but don't you know, if I get this right, if I do this perfectly, then my mother will love me. It's like those are the scars they carry.
Yeah.
And I use that as more of a coping mechanism to kind of lessen the blow. But for my friend Robert, he had a brother who also committed suicide. And he was hoping to bring the family back together on that, and spent a weekend with his folks and his brother and his sister, and felt like this was what was really going to do it. One of the children committing suicide, they had to see how broken their way of living was. And at the end of the weekend, his father told him, well, this was nice, but until you want to come back and be one of Jehovah's Witnesses, this is never going to happen again. And it was just such a destructive thing. It's very hard to really convey the emotion and the fear and how you feel when you're raised in something like that, because like with my daughter, she knows she can go out there and try anything. Go out there, and I've told her many times, go fail greatly. I will be here to pick you up and put you back on your feet and support you. Whereas with myself, I've had surgeries and been dropped off at a seedy hotel until I was good enough to drive home, because there was no one there. There was no family. There was no one that I could depend on. And as I'm preparing for the surgery, I'm going to the store and buying food I can leave in a shitty hotel room for days that doesn't need to be refrigerated. And I can prepare with my left hand because it was my right arm that was being operated on. And no matter what my daughter went through, I would be there for her. So if you don't have that basis, that thing to fall back on, you really do kind of feel like you're out there in the world all by yourself, and you're trying to figure it out. Who can you trust? Who can you love? Who will love you? And it's taken me a long time to even begin to learn those things.
Okay, man. That's like, see, I had a childhood where my dad, my biological dad, he was an abusive alcoholic. So I mean, I carry those scars, mentally forever.
Well, we all do, and growing up in foster care is very much the same. Where I have this terrible disconnect with it. I should have a parent to fall back on, and when I need someone to talk to, or if I need advice on something, I should not be having to go to my friends for parental advice. But unfortunately, because I grew up in foster care, I don't have any connection to my foster parents at all, and it's just growing up in this like weird religious background, and then going out on your own and realizing there's a whole different world out there other than the bubble that they try to force us to be in. So I feel very much the same.
I think sometimes we forget that the emotional scars of the way we were brought up, like even if you can relegate the fact that your family did the very, very best they could, like that's where I'm at. Like my family did the very best they could, but there was still something missing. Like and that pain doesn't just go away. And you hope that you can fix it and not screw up your kids, the opposite way as you were screwed up.
Yeah.
But I feel like in some ways we're a lot more caring because of the situation that we were in. A lot more, we empathize more with others. Maybe that's just
we don't want to commit the same mistakes. It's very much like a phoenix rising from the ashes sort of story. Like Nate, you literally gave up an entire life.
Wow.
That's my
I'm gonna bring that.
And you got a phoenix there.
Yeah.
Perfect. And I'm sure the rest of you guys with your upbringing feel almost the same way. You let go of a life that it was the only life you knew, to start something brand new and start from the beginning again.
Yeah. And it's terrifying to start over. It's terrifying to be out on your own and say, I'm going to do this for myself, because you don't really know if you can do it. Like there's nobody to fall back on. There's nobody to trust. There's nobody to pick you up when you fall. Like I always had somebody I could call, but I always felt that twinge of, well, I'm not making somebody proud. I'm not good enough. I'm not this or that. So I think we all feel that pain.
Yeah,
but never.
You had a decent childhood. Her dad,
nobody beat me.
Yeah,
I'll just say that.
She lost her dad when she was 6. So,
I was incredibly lucky. Nobody beat me. But
that's the scar that
I do know that there's a lot of when you start realizing that some of the generations of your family were way messed up, and then you find out things that happened to them, and then you're like, oh well, now I see. I understand why they were that way to me. They were that way to their children were that way to me, and I have to change it and try to make sure that my kids don't grow up,
break the chain. Break the chain is
exactly.
And that's huge because bad parents have never once looked at themselves before they were having parents and said, what kind of parent am I going to be? No, they just roll with it and they just continue the generational story.
Yeah.
Whereas I looked at the way that I was raised, and my father did a phenomenal job with what he was given from his father. He probably removed 90% of the physical abuse. And I would have rather been beaten 10 times as much and had love expressed to me, which was not there. But he did the best he could with what he had. And then I tried to do the best I can with what I have. And when my daughter was born, my goal was to teach her love and respect. And from day one, as I'm holding this baby who can barely lift her head, I'm struggling to tell her I love her. But that was my goal, that I can tell her I love her every day. And then it became something that was commonplace. And we say it to each other all the time. And now it was never a question with my son. And when my daughter was born, frankly, it was the worst thing imaginable because I was in a relationship. I wasn't happy. I was trying to break up with this woman, and then turned out she was being pregnant. And then on top of it, I'm having a girl, and I don't know how to raise a woman, let alone be around one. And now looking back, and I was able to tell my daughter, I'm so happy that she was a girl, because if I would have had a son, I wouldn't have been quite as thoughtful. I would have been thinking, well, I need to toughen my boy up. What were the things? What made me the man I am today? As opposed to when I was looking at her, it was like, well, no, I'm going to teach you love and kindness and respect. And that's what kind of helped to melt my heart a little bit. So now with my son, I don't think about toughening him up or raising a strong man. It's just like, this is my boy, and we're just going to go have fun and run out and take over the world. And the toughness will come, but it's more important that he's a good man more than a tough man any day.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So-
I had a similar experience with my firstborn with Conan, where there was a lot of doubt, and the situation was very similar, where, I was trying to break up with this girl, and, it was bad timing, and I didn't really know how to be a dad. I had to learn a lot on the job with that one. Yeah.
So you're in your 20s, you're at the gym, you're MMA training. Do you remember what motive, like what you were thinking? Like you're like, I want to be a fighter. Is that something that you were thinking, or did it just kind of, when you were training, you just thought maybe you might be good at it?
Well, so boy, being a teenager in the 80s, although I wasn't allowed to see R-rated movies, when they came on TV, I could record them. So I had these VHS Fox TV versions of Bloodsport or Conan or any of the Schwarzenegger movies or Van Damme or any of those badasses at the time. And I had bought a weightlifting set, and I would just sit in there and lift weights, and I'd watch these movies, and I would talk about, oh, I'll show you all someday. I'll matter. I'll be able to defend myself. I'm never going to be a victim again. But I couldn't train in any fighting whatsoever. But all men, especially, we all think that we know how to fight.
Mm-hmm.
And so when I show up to this gym, although it'd been, all I'd ever gotten in was little school scuffles, things like that, you don't realize how bad you are until you're going with people that's all that they do. And that very first night that I see the UFC on TV, then of course me and my buddies who had been drinking are 23, 24 years old. Then we start wrestling around the house and shoving each other through doors. And my whole thought was, well, I want to be better than these guys. So I'm going to start training in secret so it doesn't get back to the Jehovah's Witness community, or so nobody else knows about it. And that's when I went down to that first practice. And I called the gym, and it just so happened that the owner was there. I found out later he was almost never there, but he convinced me to sign up for a week. And my first hour and a half was an hour and a half of kickboxing. And it was terrible, but I didn't know any better. It was just a random person at the gym holding mitts and throwing hands. And then we did an hour and a half of jiu-jitsu. And that coach didn't really like to do a lot of technique. He just liked to roll all the time. He wanted to wrestle. And so we'd learn a little bit, and then we would just roll. And I was so bad, I just got choked out over and over and over again. And so as I'm leaving the gym, I said to myself, I'm going to keep coming back here so I can beat every one of your asses. Because I couldn't survive knowing that this guy who I outweighed by 50 pounds is at will taking my back and choking me out. And now the coach there.
And what was your weight right around this time?
Oh, I'd say probably between 190, around 190 or so, 190 to 200 maybe. And I just worked in construction, so I just had a construction workers pod. And the head coach there at Straight Blast Gym in the Salem Kaiser area is Matt Thornton. And yeah, we would just show up and spar. Oh, he was the best guy in the state of Oregon to train with at the time. He was the most experienced jiu-jitsu guy.
So anybody who wanted to train, they're like, you need to go train with this guy.
Because he had gotten his blue belt 2 weeks before I joined the gym. Now there are black belts. You can't throw a rock without hitting a black belt. But it was completely unheard of. But seeing how devastating this jiu-jitsu was in the UFC, and then going to a gym and then being shown firsthand, oh no, you can be choked unconscious or your arm snapped by this guy at a small gym in Kaiser, Oregon. I was just blown away by it all.
Yeah. So how long from here until Ultimate Fighter?
So I'm 24 when I start training. After about let me think. About a year of training or so, one of my coaches, who was probably 160 pounds, 5'10", he's working as a bouncer at a bar here. Like the last kind of guy you want bouncing. You want the big, intimidating guy. But instead, we have this skinny 160-pounder bouncing. And he says, hey, we're looking for other bouncers. You want to come down and work with me? Well, I already had my construction career. I worked at a sign shop. I was the journeyman sign installer. I was the shop foreman. So I was doing okay for myself. But bouncing sounded like an adventure. And I wanted to know if what I was learning actually worked on the street. So I get this gig. They're bouncing. And I don't know how many stories you want to hear about that, but we had some crazy nights because we had a dance floor. It was probably 12 foot by 12 foot, and they would cram 150 people on it. Well, somebody gets bumped, and somebody's upset, and we'd have 4, maybe 5 bouncers working. One at the front door, one at the back door, 2 or 3 on the floor. Well, as soon as there was one altercation, all the bouncers had to go to kind of shut it down. And we had what the police actually called riots break out on occasion.
Wow.
So what you're saying is Roadhouse was real.
Not only that, the advice that Patrick Swayze gives in that movie is just perfect, because it really is. It's just be cool. What if that guy calls your mom a whore? Well, is she? Just relax and do your job. And I think, to my credit, it was very rare that I ever threw anybody out that didn't come back and shake my hand later, because I never took it personal. I had one guy apologize to me who was in there the next weekend. He goes, hey, man, sorry about what went down last weekend. I'm like, people get excited. It's no big deal.
Yeah, a lot of the time it's they're drunk and really are not.
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
and we had this rule at 9 o'clock, you had to take your hat off. Why they had this rule, it was like they just wanted to give us bouncers something to do, because it's somewhat of a working class bar. And somebody shows up after work on a Friday. It's been a long week. They got their ball cap on. They're talking to some ladies. Well, now the head bouncer comes up to him and says, hey, man, it's 9 o'clock. You have to take your hat off. And he's like, dude, I've got hat hair. I've been working all day. I'm making time with this girl. I don't want to take my hat off. So I'm standing there overlooking the crowd. And the head bouncer for that night was this little Filipino guy who's, like 5'8", probably 150 or something. Again, you want a Samoan at the door. Not this tiny guy you could set your drink on top of his head. So I get this, hey, Nate, I need you in the back. So I go into the back where the pool tables are. And there he is talking to these 2 guys towering over him. And right as he sees me come up behind him, he yanks one of their hats off, which is pretty much code for, we're going to fight now. So both of the guys shove the head bouncer up against the wall and start pounding on him. So I lock up the first one in a standing rear naked choke. So in the UFC or in a jiu-jitsu class, you put the choke on somebody, it's nice and calm, you give them an opportunity to tap. In a street situation, it's a little bit more violent, because they're not going to tap. You're not going to let them go if they tap anyways. And second, everybody's instinct is to reach behind and poke you in the eyes. So when you lock somebody up in a standing rear naked choke on the street, you shake the shit out of them. And it does a couple things. It off balances them. They don't know what's going on. And then as you see their arms start flopping around, you know they're unconscious. That's where the problems always happen, where people choke someone until they're dead. They don't let go in time. So as soon as I see his arms flopping around, I chuck him down on the ground. I go to the second one, try to pull him off. He won't let go of the other bouncer because he's still got him up against the wall, hitting him. And this is the only time I threw any blows the entire time, because I don't want to get in a punching match with anybody. Everybody's got a puncher's chance. So I threw 3 knees to the back of his thigh, like I was just kneeing a heavy bag. And that got him to let go. And I locked him up on a choke, and I dragged him out of there, tossed him off. And now I'm standing above the first guy who's still unconscious, laid out on the floor. And I look up, and the entire bar is just standing there with their mouth open. And I look at him and I go, nothing to see here. Everything's cool. The guy in front puts up both his hands and goes, it's all good, brother. Right then, the first guy wakes up, and I put him back in a choke. And I'm being the movie guy that I am. I whisper in his ear, you got 2 choices. You can walk out or I'll drag you out. He's like, I'll walk out. Good choice.
Oh my God, that's a great story. So basically, he's Dalton working with Ernie Reyes Jr.
Yes. And then I think it was Monday night, I get a knock on my door, and it's the police. And I remember there was this woman cop, and she goes, yeah, there was an incident that went down at the bar the other day. Those 2 guys that you took out, they could barely walk the next day. We're investigating for excessive force. And I put on my most innocent face, and I said, but I was scared. There was 2 of them. I didn't know what was going to happen. She didn't buy it for a second. She just looks at me and goes, don't be so rough. And I looked at her and I went, look, tell them not to start shit in my bar. We won't have a problem. I didn't do half the stuff I wanted to do. She's like, we're going to be watching you. And that was it for that adventure. I had many more, but that was a good one.
So when did Ultimate Fighter come calling for you?
Okay, so yeah, I get off on these tangents for.
No,
so
that's
now,
all right. So
I like hearing these
working
stories,
the bar scene.
Stories are good.
Yeah, stories are good. So you're in your 20s. You're working the bar scene. You're training.
Yeah. So we had another big fight at the bar. This one is also a pretty awesome story. Do you want to hear this one too?
Absolutely.
You started. Go ahead.
Okay. So now the little Filipino head bouncer has been fired because I had a night off and I went down to the bar, and there was a local tough guy that had chosen to get in a fight with a college student there. And he actually asked the head bouncer out of respect, hey, do you mind if I take this guy out back and beat his ass? And the head bouncer was like, yeah, that's cool. Let's go watch. So we go out there and watch, and I'm doing commentary play-by-play as I'm drinking my beer. And the street guy beats the hell out of the college student. At one point, I even go, okay, he's had enough. Let him go. He gets up to go. The college student pulls him back down, takes a little bit more of a beating. I'm like, all right, call it a day. Let him go. Well, so the head bouncer who allowed this fight to go on at the bar, rightly so, gets fired. And so now there's this other new head bouncer, again, a guy who should not have been a head bouncer. Kind of soft, 5'10" or so, a big hook nose that just looked like it should be broken a few times. And his go-to move was always, the police have been called, which really doesn't do much to kind of diffuse a situation. So I'm standing there in the back, and I get the call, Nate, we need you in the back. So I come up there. There's this new head bouncer, and he's standing in front of a giant who I don't think I'm exaggerating if I said he was 6'6" or 6'8", 280. He was a giant. And he had these 2 little buddies, his brothers, with him who were egging him on. So the head bouncer, Dennis, says his go-to, just let everyone know the police have been called. They're on their way right now. And the big guy's brothers start jumping over him and slapping people and poking him. And finally, the big guy just goes, I've had enough. And he starts whack-a-moling people as he's walking through the crowd.
Oh my God.
So immediately, the whole bar breaks out in this massive fight. I look over at the head bouncer. He's already out. He's been hit with a pool cue, which is now broken beside him, and he is prone on the floor unconscious. So I'm standing there going, okay, so what do I do? Who am I going to take out? And I'm like, well, me being me, I got to take out the big guy, but he's now too far away from me. I can't get to him. There's too many people fighting all around. So I jump on the pool table and I run down the length of the pool table, jump over the crowd and land on his back in a full rear naked choke. And he starts bucking like he's a bronco bull trying to get me off his back. And I'm just riding this monster as he's throwing me around. Finally, he starts to go down, like goes unconscious, crashes into the cigarette machine. Now I'm on the floor on his back, still tied up in him, trying to get off. And I hear this, "That's my brother, you son of a bitch." Well, here come the brothers. Uh-oh. So I'm on all fours doing a crab walk, trying to back away from them. Another bouncer shows up, takes care of one. Well, I've still got one chasing me down as I'm backwards crawling away. And we go right by the bar where they have the wine glasses hanging down. So he breaks off a wine glass by the stem and starts stabbing me at me until I can finally get my base. And I kick him in the chest, kick the door open, and just go, "You're out." Chucks him out the door. And then later that night, we finally get everything calm. And my manager says, "Hey, go check the back door, make sure nothing's happening in the parking lot." So I'm like, cool. So I go out the back door shuts. There's the giant and his two brothers. And I'm looking up at him, and he looks at me and he goes, "Hey, sorry, just got a little excited is all." And I shook his hand and I went, "It's all good, man. I understand. No hard feelings." And I go back inside, and they canceled the dancing from that point on. So we became just a sit and drink your beer from now on. And everyone was asking me, "So what are you going to do?" Because no one knew that I had a second job. And I said, I'm thinking about trying this ultimate fighting thing because, it seemed to have worked pretty good here at the bar. So I'm going to give it a shot. And right around that time, my team had put together a competition team and asked me to be on it, at which point I said, "No, I don't know what I'm doing. That sounds scary." And they said, "No, we think you have what's in you. You train hard, you show up, you work. Let's see what you can do." And so at 26, I took my first fight. I trained for 3 months. All I did was work, eat, sleep, train. That was it. And won my first fight in about, I think, a minute and a half with a triangle. And just kind of kept going from there. And at 30, I was still working in construction at the sign shop. And I'd gone as far as I could there. I was the shop foreman. I was the head installer, the journeyman, all that stuff. And I had a disagreement with my boss where I felt disrespected. And I just said, "You know what? I'm done with this. I'm going to take my shot, becoming a fighter. We'll see what happens. The worst case scenario is I fail miserably. And then I'll pick myself up and try again." And so I remember that night just being, oh my God, what am I thinking? The most I'd ever made is like $500. I've got a 2-year-old baby. I've got a mortgage. How am I going to make this work out? But I just kept kind of grinding away at it. And it was that same summer. So this is 2002. My parents called me and said that my father had been diagnosed with this disease where his bone marrow quit producing red blood cells. So he was essentially slowly suffocating over months as all of his red blood cells died off. And so in November of that same year, I went and stayed with them in Bend, Oregon, 3 hours from where I lived, and helped kind of get ready for his passing and all of that. And when I first got there, he was still able to get up and walk around, and we drove down and picked up his final paycheck. He was still working in construction at 62 for somebody else, a job that he really didn't enjoy, but it put food on the table. And after picking up his paycheck, he was passing out on the drive back home. And he wasn't even able to live in the home that he had built with his own two hands. Him and my mother were renting a place in Bend, Oregon. And then just over the next few weeks, all those blood cells died off, and he became more and more invalid and bed bound. And about this time, I had told my mother, well, I've contracted to take a fight back in Richmond, Virginia on the East Coast where I hold a title. And she said, well, if you've said you're going to do something, you should do it. And although she never supported my fighting at all, she said it was violent, didn't want me doing it. She was always very much, if you say you're going to do something, you should do it. So I kissed my father goodbye and flew out to Richmond, Virginia. And he ended up dying while I was cutting weight on a Friday. And I got the call as I was rehydrating. And so that the very next night, Saturday, I took out all of my aggression, everything that had been building up in these previous months of seeing him die and dealing with all that on my opponent, who, as usual, was 4 inches taller than me, had 3 times as many fights as I had. And I got a hold of his arm in the first round and snapped it and caused him to tap there. And I ran around the ring just screaming my head off, letting the emotion just flow out of me. And this short guy came up to the ring and said, "Hey, so I'm Joe Silva, the matchmaker for the UFC. I live here in Richmond, Virginia. Came out to see the fights. We're going to be doing this thing called the Ultimate Fighter. So I'm going to give you a call for that." And so I think back to that many times, how I did the best I could for my responsibilities, even with a family that had disowned me. I was there to take care of my father and help for the passing, prepare their financial documents, all that kind of stuff. But then also fulfilled my obligation to the promoter. I fought my fight, and it all worked out, and that I got my shot with the UFC and was able then to go in and be a part of the Ultimate Fighter.
Man,
that's amazing
story.
Yeah. It's funny you mentioned the running around and celebrating, and then before the show we were talking about my first fight and how that happened. When I won, what I thought happened in my head, and I swear I remember it exactly this way, I ran around the cage screaming and celebrating. When I got shown the tape back, I just stood over the guy and just screamed at him, and I didn't move. And it was the weirdest thing I had ever seen. I was like, what? When did that happen? And I never ran around the cage, nothing. But I to this day, and that's been like 10 years now, I was like, no, I definitely ran around the cage and celebrated. I don't know what this other footage is.
The multiverse. That's your answer, the multiverse. So Ultimate Fighter was what? Spike TV, right? I believe.
Yeah.
So
that was a long time ago.
Yeah, that was a long time ago.
05
It was a good
or
show,
06?
though.
I think it was 05. I think we
05,
shot
right?
in 04, and I think it aired in 05. Yeah.
I remember being so excited to see this because I had at that point I had been kind of watching like old Gracie tapes and stuff, and I was really, really excited to see this reality show essentially.
Yeah, and this is before. I mean, UFC was kind of big, but people were still kind of drugging it off. Like, I'm a fan of like old school UFC. So like I grew up in the '80s. So like I'm talking like Ken Shamrock and Horace Gracie and Tank Abbott and all those, when there was basically no rules. It was gladiator type fighting.
It wasn't quite a legitimate sport yet, or at least it hadn't been broadcasted to the masses that they were trying to become a legitimate combat sport. So this show was kind of the first time like the general public was really seeing that.
Yeah, and Vegas was starting to pay attention, I believe, too, around this time.
Yeah, well, when the Fertittas and Dana White bought the UFC, then they went through the process of legalizing it through all the states, and the Fertittas are huge in Las Vegas. So they were able to put their muscle behind it and kind of blow it up. And then with the Ultimate Fighter, you got to realize that, no, these aren't just idiots down at your local bar fighting. These are people that have dreams and passions and things that they fight for, and were skilled athletes. And then you had someone like Jason Thacker, who was a great guy. I enjoyed him, considered him a friend, but he was nowhere near the capabilities that the rest of us had. But it was kind of the usual that everyone thinks that they can fight until they meet with somebody that, no, that's all that I do. And
right.
so,
he was training out of his garage, right?
Pretty much, yeah.
Yeah. Me and Nicole and Willow, and I don't know if you are, Omar, but we're professional wrestling fans. Matt Riddle, who's in NXT in WWE right now, he I think was on one of the seasons of Ultimate Fighter, right?
Yeah, he had a pretty good career too. I think he only stopped because of the really ridiculous marijuana restrictions that they to this day they still kind of have.
They just actually, I think yesterday just came out that they're going to stop testing for the cannabinoids and all that kind of stuff. So
I mean, it just doesn't affect their performance, man. It's just there's no reason for that to be
Yeah, see,
If
Tito
anything-
agrees with you.
If anything, it's going to deal with the pain and keep people from becoming dependent on opioids because it's at least a more holistic way of dealing with that.
Well,
Yeah,
and to
but
your point,
in the professional wrestling world, Matt Riddle is basically the brand new RVD. So
Okay, so he's high flying.
yeah,
well,
I
and
wish they give him
cannabis
a
has
different
helped
gimmick,
me.
though. I'm like, I hate this dude. Like, I really do. Just
So-
hate.
During your time as a UFC fighter, was it hard to have to be in the ring with one of your best friends?
Oh, during the filming of the show?
Yeah.
It was really tough because you're living in this house with 16 other idiots who you never know at any point you may be chosen to fight that person the very next day. And for me, I was looking at this as this is my job. I'm going to take this very seriously. I'm here to provide a future for my daughter. And a lot of the other guys, they were a lot younger than me. They don't have any responsibilities. They show up from day one. They're just getting hammered and talking trash to one another. And then you never knew how it was going to play out. At one point, Chris Lieben, who we were teammates back in Oregon, came to me and he said, "Hey, I won't fight you for the end of this, no matter what goes down." And I said, if that's what you decide, then let's shake on it, and that'll be what it is. And we shook on it. So it would have been interesting to see what would have happened if it would have come down to me and Lieben at the end, because if I give my word on something, I give my word. And it would have been interesting to play out, but it was incredibly stressful. And it's something that we had a reunion a year and a half or 2 years ago about this 14-year reunion for the Ultimate Fighter for some reason. And I told the guys, like, we were part of something that no one else will ever know. The first season of the Ultimate Fighter, we were the ones they figured everything out on. We didn't even know when we were going to be flown back home. We didn't know when filming was going to end.
Yeah,
we didn't know that there was going to be fights. Any of this stuff, they just kind of figured it out on the fly with us. And yeah, it was crazy.
Yeah, and you know what I think about this is because this came out at the height of reality shows. So I mean, we had The Amazing Race and Survivor and Big Brother and
right, and like Top Chef and all that.
But
stuff.
this was probably the most, because reality TV quotations. This was actually real reality TV, like based on what was out at the time, and that's what I liked about it.
Well, and especially if you're watching something like The Real World and you're like, man, I wish somebody would just beat the hell out of Puck. But you're going to get kicked off the show. But in Ultimate Fighter, it's like, oh, I can't stand Josh Koscheck. Somebody needs to beat him up. Well, let's do it. Let's make it happen.
Yeah. He is kind of the Puck of that season.
Do you have any behind the scenes of the Ultimate Fighter that you're allowed to share?
Like stuff that went down?
Yeah, like filming and stuff like that, and maybe stuff that happened that didn't air.
Oh yeah, the producers, they called it killing puppies because there was so much good content and they had to whittle it down to a 44-minute episode for 12 weeks or whatever it was. Like there was a few that really ring true. And of course they're all my stories, so they make me look good. So take that as you will. But when we chose our team captains, so we had just come from the gym. It was Randy and Chuck were choosing their teams, and Chuck chose Bobby Southworth first, and Randy chose me first. We get back to the house, and so we decide we need to have a team captain. And somehow half the team was already drunk by the time we were having this meeting. And I'm sitting there going, I do not want to be captain of this team. That is the last thing I want. I don't want to be responsible for anybody but myself. I just want to do my thing and try to win this. I'm going to vote for Alex Karalexis, who seemed to have a good temperament. So Alex is the first one to raise his hand and go, well, I vote for Nate. He was picked first. I think he'll be the best captain. I'm like, God damn it. Well, Stefan Bonner, who's just hammered already, starts yelling, I'm the biggest. I've been around long. I should be team captain. And he's just super loud. And Stefan's a big, loud, intimidating dude. And so I just looked at him and I said, Stefan, when you speak that loudly, I can't hear a word you say. And he just went, and sat down. And I said, guys, if you want me to be team captain, I'll be team captain. I promise you, I'll always do what I can to help us all win, but I want to win as well. So I'm going to do what I can to make myself win, but I will promise you this. I'm never going to con you, scam you, or do something. If I win this, I want it to be because I'm the best, not because I cheated somebody or played some kind of mind game. And then shortly after that, we got our opportunity to kind of prove that, as I think that was our first our first challenge, where our light heavyweights had to carry Randy Couture on a Barca Lounger through Lake Mead, through this ridiculous obstacle course. Well, out of our 4 light heavyweights, there was only one that was an actual light heavyweight, Stefan Bonner. Swick fought as light as, I think, 170. Thacker should not have been a light heavyweight. Who was the other? Someone else should not have. Loden Kincaid, who fought middleweight as well. So our light heavyweights were much smaller than the other team. They were legit light heavyweights. So Chuck's team immediately runs through the obstacle course, gets into the lake. Our team just finally makes it to the lake. And I can see that we're going to lose horribly. And in fact, our team may not even make it through the lake. Our guys are collapsing. So I look at the other middleweights who are standing there just watching, Chris Lieben, Chris Sanford, and Alex Karalexis. I said, all right, guys, as soon as Chuck team passes the finish line, we're going to run out into the lake. We're going to help carry these guys through. And Lieben looks at me and just goes, I'm not helping those losers. And Sanford said, well, I think we're supposed to stay here in this area. And Karalexis was like, I don't know what to do. And I just looked at him and I said, well, guys, I guess I'll see you at the loser house when I get kicked out then. And right then, Chuck's team crossed the finish line, and I ran out into Lake Mead and grabbed a corner of the platform. And then Randy started yelling, get your asses out here. So our entire team helped cross the finish line. And to me, that was kind of a make it or break it moment where it's like, yes, this is an individual sport, but to get there, we have to be a team. And I'm not going to let my team completely fail on the very first challenge. We need to come together at some point to work together. And then we just had things like that over and over again, where like Bobby Southworth was always kind of running these mind games. And again, this 15 years ago, people have changed a lot. And being under this pressure bubble, it's tough. But Bobby was always trying to play these manipulative little mind games with everybody, get under everybody's skin. So they were either under his thumb or he was manipulating them some way. And he could never quite get to me because I just didn't really care. What's he going to do? Talk me into a loss? But he was friends with Mike Swick. So he would get Mike Swick all riled up and belittle Swick and get everybody laughing at Swick. And then he'd go apologize to Swick in private. So he was always running these manipulative games. And I'm in the kitchen after practice. My day is done. I'm exhausted. And I go, you know what? I'm going to have a beer. I deserve to chill and relax and just breathe a little bit. So I crack open a nice cold Corona, take a drink. And right then, Bobby Southworth comes into the kitchen and goes, God damn, Quarry, I put that beer in the fridge for me. That's my beer. And immediately I was like, so if I get angry in return, he'll know that he's finally gotten to me. If I just go, oh, Bobby, I'm so sorry, here's your beer back, well, then he knows I'm under his thumb. So I looked at him and I took a long drink of the beer and I said, shit, Bobby, I kind of figured you'd be drinking light beer. Walked right out of the kitchen because he was super fat for the weight he needed to make. And I thought that was just a perfect burn. And I was like, dude, there's nothing you're going to do that's going to be able to get to me. So just go play your games with other guys.
He had brutal weight cuts, man. I was surprised he could actually fight and compete.
Yeah. Yeah, he did. And he came in so heavy because I had just assumed there's going to be fighting on the show. It's a show about fighting. It's the Ultimate Fighter. And so I came in as close to weight as I needed to be to cut. I came in shape, and Bobby was 20 or 30 pounds overweight. And so the producers pulled us into a meeting and said, we're going to give you insight that you never give a reality show person. We're going to tell you what's going to happen. You guys are going to fight. So whatever preparations you need to make, you need to start making it now. And so Bobby just lost his mind. He's like, oh, nobody told us we were fighting. Yeah, I'm not fighting for free, blah, blah, blah. And my team was like, oh, that would be awesome because we're tired of these stupid challenges that we keep losing. And then that's when Dana White had the famous where he pulls in and says, do you really want to be a fighter? Is that why you're here? Or are you just here to be a reality show guy? And over and over again, there was always some kind of drama. And I'm sitting there and what was it? We were promised that we were going to get one night out on the town. And so that night just kept getting pushed off. And finally, Bobby riles up his whole team and some of the guys to, well, we're not going to do any more filming if you don't give us our night off and give us the break from all this. So like 11 o'clock at night, all the producers are there and they're yelling and telling everybody. And I'm sitting there and finally I stand up and go, dude, can I just go to bed? You know that I'm here to fight. I'm here to do this thing. I don't care. I said from the very beginning, when I was first being casted for the show, I said, I'll fight whoever you want me to fight. I'll do whatever you want me to do, but I won't look like an idiot. I'm not going to do something that sells out my morals because I have a little girl and I don't want her to be able to point to me being an idiot during this show as an excuse for her bad behavior. So I just always tried to maintain myself and do the right thing, no matter what it would be. And I think when you're doing a filming that lasts 7 weeks, you have guys that start off with this halo image that this is who I am. And then as the weeks go by and the stress gets harder and harder, it starts to wear away and you find out, no, who they really are underneath that facade. And for me, I think I looked just more tired as time went on. I played a lot more solitaire in my room by myself.
Yeah. I think that was one thing that really stood out to me during the first season was that there was all these really big personalities and you can kind of tell who was a little more mature versus who wasn't, you know, and they were just kind of there. What stood out to me about you was that you had it wasn't like an old school martial artist, like samurai kind of thinking, but it was like a foreman that's been there, like someone that you kind of respected. And then you telling me that you were in construction makes total sense. You know, I worked in kitchens my entire life, and like that was the guy that I respected, was the guy that worked in the trenches and kind of just was at ease because he had been there. He had known everything. You always took everything in stride. And I thought the dynamic with you and Chris Lieben was really funny because he was such like a wild child. He seemed ready to explode, and you were kind of like the one to temper everyone down. You're like, yeah, calm down. It's all right. Let's train. Let's do our job, and we'll get through this. And it like I said, it's something that stood out to me a lot, and something that I remember to this day because I wasn't in jiu-jitsu at the time of watching that. I literally signed up after that season, you know, and I was trying to be that guy and never be the guy who was too boastful or talking too much. I also didn't want to be the guy who didn't speak up at all and maybe was seen as like a weak person. So I gotta say, man, you inspired a lot as far as my jiu-jitsu career goes.
Well, thank you. And I think that fighting is one of the most personal things someone can do publicly, because you find out exactly who you are and the whole world sees it when you're fighting in that cage or in that ring, because you put on display. Will I tap as soon as the submission is slapped on? Well, when the referee is asking me if I can see because there's blood in my eyes, will I say no, or will I fight till I have nothing left? You really expose who you are in a very personal way. And that was really the reason why I took my very first fight. I was probably 6 or 7 years old, and I'm at the beach, and the waves start coming in, and I get cut off from my family, and I'm so scared that I sit down in the sand and I start crying. And an older boy grabs my hand, and when the waves go out, we run across the beach to the safety of my parents. No, I'm 6 or 7 years old. And if my 6 or 7 year old did that, I'd be like, it's okay, buddy. It's all right. Waves are scary. But as that child, I never forgot that for the next 20 years. Am I still that little child that when the waves come in, am I going to sit down in the sand and cry? Or will I fight till I have nothing left? And then my first fight, signing on that contract, knowing, okay, in 3 months, I'm meeting somebody in a warehouse to fight in a ring. I don't know anything about him. I don't know what he looks like. And he's going to try and beat me into submission. Well, I win that fight. I win my first 5 fights without too much struggle. It wasn't until my 6th fight that I have an all-out war. that lasted for 27 minutes. The first round was 22 minutes, and then we came back out for a 5-minute overtime. My opponent I separated 3 of his ribs, popped his arm, actually knocked him unconscious during part of the fight. The referee didn't see it. I pulled him back into the ring, hit him again. He woke up, we kept fighting. That's a whole nother story.
God.
But even up to my last fight against Jorge Rivera, in the first round, he shatters the whole left side of my face. And the bell rings, and I go back to my chair, and I'm sitting there, and Stitch Duran is working on me, and he shoves the swab up my nose, and he's trying to get the bleeding to stop. Well, every time he does that, he always puts his hand over my mouth, and he's got a rag in his hand, so I can't breathe. So I'm always pushing away his hand. This has happened quite often, obviously, my nose. And he says, "Brother, let me work here. Your nose is broken." And I had this little epiphany where I said to myself, dude, you have no idea. My nose is broken. My cheekbone is broken. My septum is broken. I'm a mess. And this little voice inside my head said, you should just quit. When everybody sees the x-rays and sees how much damage you've taken, no one will fault you for quitting. And then this big booming voice came over the top and said, if you quit on your stool, you will be a coward until the day you die. You're a fighter. You're going to fight. You're either going to knock him out or he's going to knock you out. One of those 2 things is going to happen. Now get up and do your job. And I got up, and Jorge TKO'd me mercifully very quickly into the second round. But here I am 10, almost 11 years later. My face is put back together. Still a little nerve damage, but nothing too big of a deal. But I can say no matter how the fight went, win or lose, no one ever broke my heart. My heart never stopped working. And that's something I think that I answered that question from that 6-year-old boy sitting in the stand. And no, I will fight till I have nothing left. And that gives me a confidence in the situations that I get into, because if somebody comes up to me in a bar and it's like, I want to test myself against you, you think you're tough, I'll be like, dude, I'll go someplace else. I have no desire to get punched in the face for free by you. In fact, I've gone up to big guys in bars who are eyeing me and went, you guys are gigantic. You must be the bosses around here. I'm going to walk all the way around you to get to the bathroom. And then they feel good about themselves, and I don't get punched in the face, and my ego is the same. It's a growth that comes with combat, with experiencing, with going through life and testing yourself to where you realize. When I was 17, I remember telling one of my bosses, I'm not afraid of anything. I'll do anything. And I climbed up this really steep ladder, my legs shaking the whole time. And now at 48, I can say, oh no, there's all sorts of stuff I'm scared of. But I also know that I'll fight till the end of it. So it's not really not being afraid that's the important thing. It's what you do with that fear. And that's one of the best things I like about fighting. As I said, you expose who you are to the world and to yourself, and you can't run from that. You find out who you really are deep inside.
Yeah. See, me and Nicole have this conversation. She's a teacher this is her 16th year, and she sometimes questions if she's still a good teacher. So I think listening to that kind of is inspirational, because you can take that across any field. People are, wonder if they're good enough.
Just keep fighting. You just keep doing what you know is right and what you know is good, and hopefully it will always be good enough.
Right, and the fear is always going to be there. You're just, it's about having the will to keep pushing forward. I mean, I think, Jeff John's Green Lantern run pretty much did that, the entire way through, and they did it pretty well.
Well, and I pointed to the phoenix on my right shoulder. On my left shoulder is rock, Japanese kanji, but surrounding it is the words fortitudine vincimus, which is Latin for by endurance we conquer. And over again through my life, combined with the phoenix, it is, well, sometimes I have to be reborn and start over again, but other times I just need to dig down deeper and just keep grinding at it. And all too often people will quit right before the finish line, right before success. And if we can keep that grinding attitude, there was a great book that I read called Ultra Marathon Man, of this guy who runs marathons that are well over 100 miles. And the phrase I got out of that book the most that I love so much was, if it doesn't hurt, you're doing it wrong. So as I'm going through these struggles, I'm going, yeah, this really hurts, but it's supposed to hurt. That's how this is supposed to be. If it was easy, everyone would do it.
When you're in the middle of all this, did you expect this to take off the way it did for you?
Not really. I just kind of live by the day, and I always have long-term plans and goals and ideas. But at some point, I'd wish that I dreamed bigger, because all of these things coming through, starting training at 24, and then 11 years later, I'm fighting for the world title for the UFC. I never dreamed my life could go that way. It's been such a phenomenal journey for me that, yeah, makes me wish I would have dreamed even bigger.
I got a question here.
Isn't that everything though? Like when you're like, I have everything I want. What's the next thing? Like,
Yeah.
What's the goal? The next goal to conquer. What's the next
challenge?
Thing?
Yep.
So as a fighter, do you go in wanting to end it quickly, or do you feel like dragging it on is best strategy in a UFC fight?
Well, always, if you can end it quickly, it's going to be better for you, because you're going to take less damage. And that's a big thing. Like my last fight, having my face reconstructed, that means you've got at least 6 months as the bones are coming back together. But it really kind of, it's how it plays out. I compare it to, it's like you're running a marathon, but you're not sure where the end is. And so if you think you see the finish line and you sprint to it, but you were wrong, well, then you're going to be exhausted. And then you get a beating from the other guy who is still ready to run that entire length of it. So you really have to be prepared to run that marathon, but also be ready to sprint at any time if you see the end coming near. So, and I've seen a lot of fighters that would they'd get so excited, they think the end was near, and they would just go all out, throwing all these punches and not be able to finish their opponent. And then they would lose because they'd be too exhausted, they'd be too in the hole, and they couldn't come back out. So every time that I really turned it up to finish my opponent, it was, I am 100% sure this is going to happen, or I'm in such good shape. To me, it's just like hitting a heavy bag for 5 minutes, and I can do that. So I'm just going to keep hitting you and nailing you with stuff until the referee jumps in and finishes us.
That's awesome. So I see something really cool behind you. When did that all start for you?
So Zombie Cage Fighter was just kind of something I was toying with for 10 years or so. Or, each gym has kind of its own personality, and I hang out with a bunch of old school nerds. So we're sitting around talking about comic books and movies and this and that. And I started thinking, what would it be like if an MMA fighter was to jump into that world? Obviously, I couldn't take out Spider-Man or the Hulk or Superman or anything. Maybe Batman if I get him without all of his wonderful toys. But I started thinking about zombies. And I was never a huge zombie fan in the first place, because most of the stories are always just, it's a billion zombies and a handful of humans trying to survive. Not very much character development. But I started thinking, well, what if I was to fight a zombie? How would I beat it? Oh, I can't knock it out. It's not going to tap out. But I can break it down, so I can start tearing out the knees, or if I can break its neck, those kinds of things. And I just kind of started toying with the idea of if I was to tell a story like this. And then I happened to be a guest on the show, Attack of the Show on G4, which I just love that show. It's a super popular pop culture type show. And at the end of my interview, they said, well, what are you working on right now? And I said, well, right now I'm working on Zombie Cage Fighter. Well, the rules are pretty simple. For humans, no biting. For zombies, mostly biting. And the producer came up to me afterwards and said, oh, man, I love that idea. I want to see everything you've got on it. And I shook his hand, looked him in the eye, and said, cool. Let me head home. I'll get everything together and come back down and make a presentation, because I didn't have anything done. But I sat down in front of the computer, and I had the idea of the beginning. I had the ending in my mind, and just started writing. And I handed my story off to a few people much smarter than I am to give me some notes on it. Ended up with this 22-page story that I really enjoyed. I thought it was good enough to have some legs to it. And then in 2012, made what we now call Issue 0, the comic book that's just a snapshot into the world of Zombie Cage Fighter. And my whole goal was to see if anybody else thought this was a cool story besides me. And the complaint I got from everybody was, okay, well, when's the next issue coming out?
Yeah, so, and that came out at San Diego Comic-Con, as we talked pre-show, which is like the Super Bowl of conventions.
Dude, and I've been going to San Diego Comic-Con. I haven't been in a few years, but I went to my first one, I want to say 22 years ago or so, when you could still buy a ticket and walk in on this show floor. I was the first person on the floor Sunday morning.
Wow.
I just always loved Comic-Con and escaping into that world, and to be there as a guest launching my own comic book was just phenomenal.
Man, I can't imagine. I run a horror themed podcast, so your book has been on my radar for quite some time.
Nice.
I think I can't remember where I first heard it from. It probably was Kevin Smith, but I think also an MMA podcast. Maybe Brendan Schaub or somebody might have mentioned it. I don't. It'd be hard for me to remember, but I immediately looked it up. I was just like, "What is this?" It has like all the things that I like. It has martial arts. It has horror, and it's comic book. So
I love the classic art though, like that.
Yes.
Like the.
Yeah, I was gonna say, since we're WWE fans, I know there are some fans in the WWE. I believe the New Day actually have talked about Zombie Cage Fighter. So you got fans everywhere, man.
Man, I appreciate it because I just consider myself once again just so lucky to have what a great team around me. Like this cover is by Alex Horley, who is as close to a living Frank Frazetta as you can get. And this is an actual painting in my house. Great. And then Travis Kotzebue, who's done the interior artwork. There's a sneaker page for you. My buddy Dwayne Bang Ludwig fighting 4 zombie children. As I started writing this, I wanted every fight scene to be very realistic for one thing, and to build to a crescendo for the end of it. But over and over again, what I say is, if we look at Rocky, Rocky was a boxing movie. Well, in reality, if you take out boxing, it's about a down and out loser who just has one last chance to matter, to do something with himself. And with Zombie Cage Fighter, the whole concept behind it is, in my actual life, I've done okay. I've won some good fights. I've lost a few fights. It is what it is, but I've done okay for myself. Well, in the zombie cage fighting world, I never quite make it over that hump. Now I'm that burned out fighter, well past his prime, but I've got nothing else. And I'm trying to provide for my little girl. And I show up for one final MMA fight, and the promoter tells me after my loss, he's like, dude, I can't sell tickets on you anymore. Nobody's excited to see you on the card. They're sad. Your time has passed. It's time to go. And as I'm walking out of the venue, I get introduced to another promoter who says, look, if you're willing to step up, I've got something you might be interested in. And he introduces me into the underground world of zombie cage fights, where if you do well, they'll pay you a little bit of money. If you don't do so well, then next week you could potentially be the zombie on the other side of the cage. But if you take away the zombies, if you take away the cage fighting, the heart of the story is, it's my story. It's a father trying to provide for his little girl. And that's what my journey's been about all along, is to give my daughter the opportunities I haven't had. She's a junior in college now, and she's the first person in the family to go to college, to potentially get a degree. And those were the goals that I set and what I worked for. And with Zombie Cage Fighter, it's still that same goal. And my character, as I refer to him as Rock, is just working to try and get to that point where, live or die, his little girl is taken care of. And I think every parent out there can relate to that story at least somewhat.
That's awesome. I'm just curious, what is she studying for in college?
Business.
Business.
So if she wanted to follow my footsteps, I have no doubt she could be a world champion right now, but not everybody likes to get punched in the face. So I support her decision to use her brain for something other than a punching bag.
Well, congratulations for sure.
Thank you.
Yeah. Also, I got to ask, where can I get one of those sick shirts that you're wearing right now?
Well, right now we have the website zombiecagefighter.com is kind of shut down because we're really focused on the Kickstarter. Okay. But one of the reward tiers is you can order the graphic novel and a t-shirt as well. Okay. And we had it set up as it was going to be a random shirt out of the supply of the many Zombie Cage Fighter shirts that I have. But I think we're going to be able to let people choose the shirt that they want, which that's what I want to do anyways, because I love wearing my shirts. This is all I wear outside of the house. And I've been so fortunate again to have just some great artists come together and help bring my story to life. It's been really cool.
Yeah. How many?
Can I do that through the website, or do I go through the Kickstarter?
Through the Kickstarter, because the website right now is just focused on the Kickstarter. So right now the website says everything is out of stock. but at the Kickstarter, there's one tier where you get the graphic novel, the shirt, and then I think we're most likely, we send out a survey afterwards to tell us what size shirt you want, and I'm going to say, hey, go to the website, pick out a shirt. If we have it in stock, I'll send that your way. If not, give me your second choice type of thing.
Okay,
So
excellent.
Yeah,
I'll definitely do
on
that.
the Kickstarter.
Pardon me?
How many days you have left on your Kickstarter? I know me and Nicole have backed it.
Thank you. I think we're down to 9 or 10 days.
It says 9 days, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Actually, Brian backed it and then told me he backed it.
Well, I appreciate it because
remember, and you skewing reality, right?
Isn't that always how it works with you and Brian? Like Brian tells you after the fact.
Well, I'm like, oh, okay.
There's been times where it's like, I want to back this this Kickstarter, and my husband's like, I don't know. I'm like, but you just bought Lego.
No, but seriously, this Kickstarter is totally worth backing. Nate has a great story, and if you're a horror fan and you love fighting and comics, I mean, you get the best of all the worlds right there in one.
So if you're me, great.
Yeah.
I'm a huge zombie fan, so this totally is in my. I totally want one of these comic books. I definitely want one of the the figurines, though. Like, I'm gonna have to try to convince my husband to let me back it.
and that is the coolest thing ever, because I was such a fan of Randy Bowen before ever even meeting him or becoming friends with him, and then having him do a zombie cage fighter statue. And so, yes, it's definitely a commitment because it's more of a high dollar item. However, a Randy Bowen statue that I bought 20 years ago is an Incredible Hulk. It says on the bottom number 467 or 5,000. So it's pretty common for a Bowen statue run to be 5,000. I did 100 of the zombie cage fighter Bowen statue. So potentially probably the most limited Bowen statue ever. So it's not just cool and supports my brand. It's also a good investment for your future.
Yeah. Can we take a closer look at that? That's
you got it.
Detail of that.
So I'm looking on there right now. That's amazing looking. That's incredible. And I see an option for the shirt and the book. Is there an option for the shirt and a signed copy of the book?
I am signing every graphic novel.
Oh,
so that's
perfect.
just a given.
I'm bringing you up to.
Holy cow!
I love the detail in that.
Randy Bowen.
That's good about Bowen. Bowens, they are super detailed.
There's screws that are in my back. I love how the knees are worn out from throwing knees to the faces. Same thing with the elbow.
Dude, you make a hell of a zombie, I gotta say.
Thank you. But talk about a dream come true to have a Bowen statue of my own creation. Just
have you thought about maybe pitching this as a series to cable? Or
yeah. I've got some guys that I'm working with right now to kind of drive me, whether it's Netflix or a movie or a series, whatever the case may be. I'm definitely open to it. The biggest thing is just making sure that my intellectual property is taken care of and I don't get the Hollywood treatment, because I've talked to a lot of people, like the gentleman who wrote the Johnny Cash movie Walk the Line. He had a net profit deal with the studio. Well, it cost something like $30 million to make the movie. The movie grossed like $150 million. He has never seen a dime because no Hollywood movie ever makes any profit. And so when I had the Zombie Cage Fighter screenplay actually done, within 2 weeks, I had an offer on the table from a producer who wanted to make this movie. The offer was so bad, so insultingly bad, that I was angry. And I talked to a lawyer who was going over the contract with me. And I said, how dare he make an offer like this to me? I'm just insulted. And the lawyer starts laughing. And she says, what don't you understand? This is Hollywood. Their job is to make money. Your job is to not be stupid. And it was like a light bulb moment went off in my head. And I just thought, oh my God, if I only looked at every business dealing that way. that, well, their ultimate goal is to make as much money as possible. My goal, my job is to not be stupid and give away my intellectual property, my story, all of that. So with Zombie Cage Fighter, it's just been very slowly growing it through grassroots, like the Tap Out brand. Now it's everywhere. It's in Kmart. It's more of a douchey type brand. You don't see a lot of cool people wearing Tap Out so much. But back in the day, 20 years ago, when I'd go fight at Gladiator Challenge on an Indian reservation someplace, they would have their van there and the 4 guys, and it was this underground cool brand that only people in the know were wearing.
Yeah,
Well, I think now the McMahon family owns Tap Out. So
and that's how I see Zombie Cage Fighter. This is that grassroots underground cool, where you're just dealing with me. I'm the guy. If you have a problem with something, you send me an email and I'm like, oh man, I screwed that up. I'm sorry. How can I make this better? Or if you're happy with something, I'm like, yeah, man, I love that shirt too. Like there's one artist that's done a few shirts for me by the name of Steve Nazar. Steve Nazar was the artist for TNC Surf when I was a kid, Town and Country Surf.
Oh man, that's so cool.
Back in the 80s, for some reason, there was this big surge of OP, Ocean Pacific, Gotcha, TNC, all these surfing brands were super cool. I had never even seen a warm ocean, but I loved TNC surfing shirts. So money was tight, but every once in a while, if I could afford it, I would get a TNC surf shirt. Fast forward, 20 some years, it's Friday night. I've been drinking. I'm thinking about Zombie Cage Fighter, and I'm like, you know what? I would love to have one of those shirts by that TNC. So I start looking on eBay, and you can't find one. Everything is vintage. It's $80. It's torn to pieces. But I find the artist's website, and I message him, and I tell him what a huge fan I am of his. We end up becoming friends. He drew my first Zombie Cage Fighter shirt for me, which is just, if I go back to my 13-year-old self and say, hey, man, you're not going to believe this shit. This artist that drew this shirt that you love, he's working for you now. And then the second shirt that he did for me, another one of my favorites, I meet him for lunch, and he lives down, I think, in Santa Monica. And we're sitting there eating tacos, and I put out this little sketch. I'm like, okay, so I want the Zombie Cage Fight like surfing, and he's chasing the humans, and he wants to get a bite of them. And he looks at my sketch, and he goes, that is so bad. It looks like he's surfing on a door. And I looked at him, I said, I know you're making fun of me now, but that is an awesome idea. Put him on a door. So one of my favorite Zombie Cage Fighter shirts is the Zombie Cage Fighter surfing on a door, chasing myself by the artist that I was such a huge fan of as a kid. So again, I've gotten these phenomenal artists, from Alex Horley doing the cover, Travis Kotzebue doing the interior pages, Steve Nazar doing shirts for me. It's been just amazing to see it come to life and see different artists take on it as well.
Yeah, I mean, everything about this is awesome. Like I said, I could totally see this as a streaming service, especially with like FX on Hulu. It fits right in, or even like Amazon Prime. I mean, this is more so made for a series than a movie, because then you can stretch out the storyline.
Yeah.
Yeah, I just pledged now, Nate. So I'm in.
Thank you.
Yeah, no problem, man. Thank you. As soon as I get it in, I'm going to do a full review on the Creep Show. So it's going to be fun.
Awesome.
I love this question from Terry, though. What's safer, the cage or the comic scene?
So the first show that I ever did with anything Zombie Cage Fighter, there was a zombie con being held up in Seattle. So I've been to dozens of Comic Cons up to this point, but this is my first time doing a show by myself. All I had was one T-shirt, my first T-shirt, a sticker, and a picture of me as a zombie. And I sat at my table with a TV screen playing fights of mine. And I'm just sitting there, and people would come up to me like, aren't you Nate Quarry, the UFC guy? And I'd be like, yeah. Like, what are you doing here? This is Zombie Cage Fighter. Here's my T-shirt. Do you want a sticker? And it was just the coolest thing to be there at that show. I got to meet the author of Fight Club, whose name escapes me at the moment. Got to meet him there. Yeah. And that night, to answer that question, I go out with some people who ended up becoming friends of mine, and we're out going to the bars and talking nerd stuff and all that. And one of the guys looks at me and goes, "You know, man, when I saw your name on the list that you were going to be here, I was like, screw that guy. What is he doing coming to our show? This is our stuff. He needs to stay with those jock assholes in his own world. But now that I meet you, you're actually pretty cool. You're just like us." I was like, yeah, man, I was locked in way more lockers than you would ever assume as a kid. This is
So
me.
let's dive deep into your brain here. What are some of your favorite comics?
Well, Hulk has always been my favorite character. And the reason for that is because he's such a deeper character than most people understand. When Peter David was writing the story, we got into the multiple personality disorder, the gray Hulk, the green Hulk, the savage Hulk. And what it comes down to was he was just this brainy, nerdy kid who saw his mother beaten to death, abused by his father. And he just balled up all of those emotions until he got hit with the gamma rays. And then they were able to explode out on the world and become the Hulk. And I just always related to that because I always felt like as a kid, I was just, this is who you are. This is how you can respond. This is what you can do. And then finally, once I stepped into the ring, into the cage, I was able to unleash all that unbridled rage. So Hulk was always my favorite. There's a comic that I used to take with me to my fights. Marvel 2-in-1, The Thing versus the Intergalactic Boxer. The story is almost ludicrous, where you have somebody who has one of the Infinity Stones, I believe, and he loves boxing. So he comes to the planet Earth to challenge Earth's heroes to a boxing match. And if no one is worthy enough to give him a good fight, he's just going to destroy the Earth. And so the Intergalactic Boxer, the champion, is going through every one of Earth's heroes, just right and left. The Hulk tears off his gloves. He's disqualified. It comes down to the Thing as the last one that has a chance. When the Thing boxed back in the army, I think it was, or whatever he was in, and he understands the rules and competition and puts up such a good fight. Although he's losing, the champion is about to beat him to death. Excuse me. COVID. The Thing crawls back into the ring and says, "I'm not done yet. I've got more." And the champion says, "Look, man, any planet that would spawn one such as you is worthy of surviving. I spare the Earth." And it was all because the Thing, even though he was never going to win, was able and was willing to fight to the death, to give everything that he had for the good fight. And I would take that comic with me to my fights and say, if you're better than me, so be it. But you're not going to beat me because you've got more heart, because you're in better shape, because I've done everything I can to be here and be the best that I can be. Other books that I've always loved were Lone Wolf and Cub. Was just, again, such a story I related to about a Ronin traveling with his son as he works to get revenge on his wife's murder. And that's a massive series. The manga books are that big, but there's probably 40 of them or so. And I have the entire series and just love reading that. There's just so much of it. I've got 8 long boxes of comics now. Somebody asked me what the express your love of comics without telling me how much you love comics. And I said, well, most of my retirement investments are in the Silver Age. Yeah. So I've got my little stash of books that I really love. My chase issue is Hulk #1. I have issues 2, 3, 4, and 5. Nice. So I need 1 and 6. And it's getting more and more expensive every year, unfortunately. But
do you have Hulk 181, the first appearance of Wolverine?
So I do have that issue. I think I have it graded. I think it's around a 6 or so from CGC. Okay. I had it graded at 8.5, but when I quit my job when I was 30, I had to do the classic sell a whole bunch of my stuff to pay the bill so I could continue pursuing that dream. Mm-hmm. So I used to have Hulk 181 at 8.5. I think now I have it at 6, but it was worth it to get me here, I suppose.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
With being a Lone Wolf and Cub fan, are you liking The Mandalorian at all?
Oh my God, yes.
Right? Like, it's so
I love
good.
it. Yeah, because it's just so blatantly a ripoff on Lone Wolf and Cub.
Oh, 100%.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was gonna ask, as a fighter, what did you think of the famous Daredevil Netflix fight scene? Well, they did. I think it was the first season, right? The stairwell scene, and
The
then
hallway scene?
the
Always seen
second.
in the first season, Stairwell in the second.
Yeah,
I was amazed. It just blew me away how good that was in the first season. And then when they did it in the second season and made it even bigger, it just blew my mind. If they don't pick that up on Disney Plus, I don't know what they're thinking. It's just phenomenal. And I love how he takes the beating. It's not like he's just wiping it off. No, he gets hit and you can see the pain, and then he's exhausted, and then you pick yourself up. And this goes kind of back to Rocky 1, where Apollo knocks Rocky down and he thinks the fight is over. No, you see Rocky crawling back up, and Apollo just can't believe it. Again, I feel like that more than anything has been my struggle, that by endurance I'm going to conquer, and I'll be reborn, and I'll come back and I'll fight again, whatever I need to do to make it. And to see that, especially in today's world where we need these heroes to believe in. And me as a child, I escaped through the comic book world. I would, 7th and 8th grade, I walked to school. It was about probably a mile or so distance each way. I would stop at 7-Eleven every day on the way home. So I got home at the same time, so my mother didn't question why I was gone. And I would look at the spinner rack of comics. And one day out came this new comic, and as I was just starting to buy and collect, X Factor #1. And I always wanted to get in on the first issue of these comics so I could know the whole story. I didn't know anything about the whole backstory of the X-Men and all that. But this was $1.25. I did not have $1.25. So I took it and I hid it in the peachy folders in the back of the store. And I went out scouting for cans and bottles all around the city until I had $1.25. And then I bought X Factor #1. And I remember running home, and I remember exactly where I was sitting as I was reading that book in my bedroom.
Oh, wow.
And I was so amazed at the storyline, how you had these mutants who were standing up for their own rights, and they were battling against oppression and racism and all those other bad things. And then sticking the evil racist guy with the bill at the end of it while they went out and saved Rusty and brought him into the fold. And I'm sitting there going, this is how it should be. The good guys should win. And as they're fighting against these things, it just really sucked me into that world even more so.
yeah, that
I'm
was a
very
good
much-
issue. I remember that too.
I'm very much of that reality too, where it's like I escaped into the world of the X-Men, and it was just no turning back that after.
It was always Fantastic Four for me. Like, the Thing is probably my favorite character in all of comics. I just like, it's like you were saying earlier with the Daredevil TV show and stuff, and even in the comics, that kind of John McClane, Die Hard, like, the guy takes a beating but he keeps coming forward thing. Yeah. And I've always loved those kind of characters.
Yeah, well, with Matt Murdock, it was always about his dad, who was a boxer, and what happened to him. That was his motivation.
Right.
Yeah.
And you're motivated by Captain Marvel.
It was funny because I didn't start out a comic fan. Like, my first comic book was Stranger in Paradise. So I was a tattoo girl. Like, I understood that whole like dynamic of being who you are and not like trying to figure out how to let the world know who you were, and having those close people that got you there. So like that was my beginning. But then I didn't read Captain Marvel, but when I saw the movie, I couldn't like escape that little montage of her always getting up. And I think that I said, like, that is kind of like the scene that I think of about my life. It's like, yeah, you can hit me, but I'm going to keep on getting up, and I'm going to keep on coming forward, because if I give up, then you win, and I'm not going to let you win. Like, I'm not, like, I don't give up. And I guess, like, no matter what happens to me, I always find a way to get back to where I was. So.
Yeah.
she's like the heart of, like, now I have a person to put that with, I guess.
Yeah, it's
I'm gonna have to log on
it
to
was
that.
a very strong message, not only for everybody, but for women.
I cried like a baby.
Yeah.
I did, which is not a.
Yes, we know that.
I
You
cried like
cried
a
at
baby.
everything.
Except for the Mandalorian.
Okay, so
It's okay.
what
You're not
about
completely heartless.
yeah? What about movies? What type of movies are you into?
Jeez. Well, my favorite movie is Gattaca. Do you know
Really?
Gattaca?
Yeah, that's
Oh
a
my
sci-fi
gosh.
movie, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
Not Ethan Hawke.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Ethan Hawke.
Ethan Hawke. And so what I love about that movie is the way that it's shot is very beautiful, but it's when people are now engineering their babies, their children, and Ethan Hawke's what they call a faith birth or a love child, where he's just born the natural way. But as soon as he's born, they tell him, "Oh, you have a heart condition. You're going to be dead at mid-30s, something like that." So all your dreams are dead. The best you can hope for is to be cleaning someone else's toilets. And he says, "No, that's not who I am." And he studies and he works hard. And then the sacrifices that he goes through to achieve his goals, the complete separate life that he undertakes, and everything that he goes through to get right there to achieve his goal. And right at the end of the movie, everything is finally worked out against all odds. And he's ready to walk onto the spaceship. But no, they have to test him one more time to make sure it's not a big con. And he's like, "Well, all right, you guys caught me. Yeah, I guess this is it for me. Everything dies. All my dreams are over." And the guy that's testing him knew all along that he was somebody else. And he goes, "No, man, I've got this. I believe in you," and sends him through on his journey. And every time I see that, it chokes me up, because I can think again over and over again how hard I've worked and all the sacrifice and struggle I've gone through. And then someone will show up and go, "Hey, let me just give you a hand here for a minute." And it'll be like this breath of fresh air that, oh, I'm not going through this by myself. And somebody does want to help and making my journey easier. And I just love that whole story of, this is who you're supposed to be. No, I'm not. Okay, I've made it. No, you didn't. Oh, I'm going to help you make it. Oh, thank God. It's just such a beautiful story to me. I just love it.
Yeah, I'm a big horror fan. I love horror movies. Omar knows that. We also, love action movies. We love the MCU. Have you seen WandaVision already?
Of course.
Yeah,
I was
what
watching that first thing this morning.
Pretty bonkers. Huh?
It was cool.
I have not seen it yet.
No spoilers, Omar. I promise.
Yeah.
I know absolutely nothing of the story, but I love Scarlet Witch, and I love Elizabeth Olsen. So, and I loved, my favorite thing in the whole world is Bewitched. So when you watch it, and it's like, oh my God, it's a throwback to all those comedies like I Love Lucy and Bewitched and all those. I was like, I love this show. And it's just funny. I also love Catherine Hahn. So yeah, it's really, it's super awesome. But I feel really bad because I have to go and do a Zoom observation thing for my second job. So I have to log in, and I already got my raise, so I don't know what my deal is, but she didn't tell me all about the observations and stuff. So, woo, that's all I'm gonna go do.
All right.
Thank you for being here. It was so much fun.
Cool.
Have fun,
Thank you.
Nicole.
And hopefully, dog is quiet.
Yeah, he'll be quiet. So, WandaVision is totally bonkers, and it's not just one comic. It's House of M, and it's the WandaVision comic, I believe, that came out in the early 2000s. So, Omar, you're gonna like
Vision one. Like you're talking about, like the Vision series that came out.
Yeah.
Okay, that's what I thought.
But when I say House of M, it's elements of it, but I believe it's going to be reversed.
Okay, yeah. I'm excited to see. I haven't had a chance to, because I never get days off. Being
You
a
need
chef,
to start showing it at your work.
I finally got a weekend off. I got 2 days off, so hopefully the restaurant's still there when I'm back on Monday.
Yeah. So Nate, this has been really, really fun. I don't know if you want to. I mean, we have about 20 minutes to hit 2 hours. If you want to stay, a little bit longer, or
I've got till about a quarter after 1. My wife is teaching some classes, so she's going to head out, and I'm left here with the baby. So I've got 15, 20 minutes left.
All right. Omar, do you have anything that you want to chime in here?
I mean, we've been talking left and right about, our experiences coming up in MMA and everything. One of the things I wanted to talk about was I remember, like, I've watched, I think, all of your fights, but I remember one where I forget the guy's name. I think it was like Caleb something. That he just you did the Running Man on him, like he was like running away from you the entire fight, and that one always
That is one
stands
of
out
the
to
videos
me.
that I came up with on my search. So
It's pretty hilarious because like I've been there too, where I've been frustrated because the other guy won't engage. I didn't handle it quite as cool as you did. I think I literally like darted after him.
So you want the story for that one?
Yeah, I would love it.
Okay, so I already told you the story about the comeback fight against Pete Sell. What I left out in that story was, so I'd had my back surgery. I was training at a new gym, went through all that. I called up the UFC, Joe Silva, and I said, all right, I'm ready. It's been 15 months since my surgery, 22 months since my last fight. I'm ready. I want to fight Caleb Starnes. And Joe Silva went, that sounds like a great fight. I'll give him a call. Joe calls me back and goes, yeah, Caleb says he won't fight you, that you're not good enough. You don't deserve to fight him because you lost your last fight and he won his. So we want you to fight Pete Sell. And I went, all right, cool. I'll fight Pete. That'll be a tough fight. But after I beat Pete, I'm going to fight Caleb and I'm going to end his career. And so I fought Pete, took a hell of a beating, ended up winning. And then as I was recovering from that, a few months later, Joe Silva calls me again and says, so you still want Caleb Starnes? I said, yes, I do. So we lined up that fight. And Joe told him flat out, he's like, he can't get away from you now. I'm going to tell him he has to fight you. So Caleb's fighting style is that of a bully. If he's moving forward, he feels good about himself. But I knew that from my perspective, he didn't have a lot of heart. There was times that he had been cut and he would play it up like, oh my goodness, I can't see. I don't know if you can continue the fight. Stuff like that. So as usual, 4 inches taller than me, has reach on me for days. But I knew my game plan was to just continue moving forward on him, never let him get settled, never let him feel confident, never let him step forward on me, not even one step. So I'm up in Canada for the fight. He's Canadian, I'm American, and I knew that they were going to boo me and cheer him as he came out. But I didn't care because I said to myself, I know they're going to cheer for him and they're going to boo me. But as the fight goes along, I'm going to win the crowd over and I'm going to win over the entire crowd. And then after I win the fight, I'm going to give the Rocky IV speech. So the fight starts and I'm just chasing him around from the beginning. And I'm never letting him get settled. He tried to shoot a couple takedowns on me, but I just stuffed him immediately and just kept going and going and going. In the second round, it seemed like, dude, is anyone else noticing how much he is running away from me? And the fans started to boo. And then we get into the third round. And now I did the running man, which you just saw in video, because I was like, dude, you're literally running away from me. And that cage is huge. It's very difficult to corner someone in a cage that big, in an octagon that size. So I did the running man. I got him to stand still for a split second and flip me off, which allowed me to grab him by the back of the head, knee him in the face once before he was off running again. And then the 10-second bell rang. Now, I've been to fights where the fighters never fought and put on a horrible performance. One that I'm always reminded me of is Nate Marquardt and Ivan Solivari. Solivari just did not engage that night. And Nate Marquardt got really angry, and you could see it. The whole crowd was angry. Everybody left, and they were upset. And so I'm saying to myself, look, I can't give you the fight that you wanted to see. But I think even more than that, you want to have memories. You want to think back to that day where you were here at these fights, the first fights in Canada here in Montreal. So I'm going to give you something you'll never forget. So that 10-second bell went off, and I covered my face, I did what I call the rock hammer and just walked at him. And as well as giving the crowd something to remember, it was also, Caleb, now's your chance. You've got 10 seconds to throw something at me, make something happen. And he continued to run away. So right after the fight, I go back to my corner. Joe Silva comes into the ring. My coach is yelling at Joe Silva, what the hell is that guy even fighting in the UFC for? And Joe Silva goes, oh, he's done. He'll never fight for us again. So mission accomplished for ending his career for insulting me. Now, as we're standing there and I'm giving the post-fight interview, I got to give the Rocky IV speech. So as I was walking out to the ring, I noticed there was a lot of boos, and I didn't really know how to feel about that too much. But as the fight went along, everybody started cheering for me. I figured if you can change and I can change, anybody can change. And I got Kenny Florian, who was interviewing me, laughing, which was awesome. And yeah, that was the whole goal there, was to, first off, don't insult me like that. Say I'm not worthy to fight you. And then to give the Rocky IV speech. I thought that was pretty awesome.
Yeah, no, definitely. What was it about him that you initially wanted to fight him in the beginning anyway? Like, because
I felt that he was a good matchup for me. I could see his style, and he had just beat Chris Lieben in a fight that I thought was very close. I think it should have gone to Lieben, but it went to Caleb. And so I always, honestly, I liked fighting guys that had beaten my teammates, because then I could get some revenge for them. That's why I wanted to fight Damian Maia, which didn't go my way, but he had beaten enough of my buddies. I was like, man, if I can get them back get you back for them, that'd be awesome.
Yeah. Well, I mean, Damian's a rock star, and
and that's
probably the best no-gi practitioner I've ever seen.
I'm happy about is that everybody who beat my ass was always good people. It would really suck if some asshole kicked the shit out of me and then was trash talking me everywhere. Because like with Rich Franklin, he has one of the best highlight videos of all UFC history, knocking me out. But other than that one night, he's always been cool to me. So I got no complaints.
Oh yeah, he's at one. He does like is it marketing work or something for One Championship now?
I think so, something like that. Yeah,
something like that. No, good for him. Good for him. He always seemed like a very nice guy.
Yeah.
So I got a question for you here, because it's been rumored for years now, especially after his last few fights. Do you believe Conor McGregor will be going to WWE eventually?
Well, he's kind of tiny.
I don't know. He's in practically my weight class. I don't see it happening. I'm a small guy. It was funny earlier, Nate, you were mentioning the 5'8" bouncer that was at 155. I was like, hey, whoa, take it easy.
He's definitely got the personality.
Yeah, you just pinned me down there. But
Conor, he's got the personality. He definitely could do it if he wanted to. I'm sure there'd be some angle that they could work in, but talking to somebody that fought at 145, 155, 170 is the biggest he's fought at. So there was a guy I was rolling with many, many years ago. And he was probably about 160, 175, 10 or so. And I'm standing up in his guard, and I grabbed both of his ankles. And I started spinning around, and I got him up off the mat. So I'm spinning him as if he was a child holding on to his ankles. And he said it was the most terrifying thing ever, because everything was a blur except for my grinning face as I spun him around. So when I think of somebody like Conor McGregor going against these 300-pound behemoths, that's all I can think about, is that they're just going to propeller him around and then launch him into the crowd at some point.
Yeah. Also, you got to figure there are a lot of guys his size in WWE now, though. I mean, not everybody can be Brock Lesnar, which
right. Well, I imagine it's also a money thing too, Brian. Like, we're talking about a guy who makes $100 million a fight in boxing, right? Which, I mean, he has the Pacquiao one in the horizon also, and the pro wrestling lifestyle it's a circus lifestyle. You are on the road for a long time, and I just don't see him being the type of guy who wants to do that.
I think he would, if he does, he would have the Brock Lesnar type thing where he just shows up when he's needed.
Sure, they probably do a special deal for him, of course.
Yeah.
It just seems like like you hear guys like CM Punk talk about it pretty candidly, and Ronda Rousey and stuff, where they couldn't do the traveling. That's what killed it for them.
Yeah.
The traveling. It wasn't the show or the competing or doing anything like that. That part they loved. It was the traveling that really wore them down.
Yeah. Well, if you look at two fighters, I mentioned Matt Riddle, who is a full-time WWE superstar, and then if you look at Shayna Baszler, who that's something I wanted to ask you. What do you think of female UFC fighters? They've kind of blown up in the last few years.
Oh yeah,
There's some skilled girls out there, man. There's some amazing talents.
Yeah. At the beginning, it was very much like UFC 1, where there wasn't that much talent in the roster, but nowadays it is, because now, no, you can make a living, you can support your family and become a star, and it's awesome. I love seeing these women who have phenomenal skill sets, and especially in jiu-jitsu, I love to see. I love to watch things where I'm not as good as other people. In MMA, I feel like I've seen most all there is to see, but in jiu-jitsu, I'm still learning a lot. So I'm always pulling up videos from black belt women who are showing me phenomenal things, and just I love seeing as they're getting better and better as the years go by, and the skill set where, yeah, it's awesome.
Yeah, I mean, like some old Shayna Baszler fights. She was a beast,
dude. And then like some of the champions out there just leave me with my jaw dropped. Valentina Shevchenko right now, she is
awesome
female embodiment of GSP, probably just good everywhere, and I never see a hole in her game at all. She's astonishing to watch.
Well, and it's so cool now that they have competition, because before, even like with the Ronda Rousey, she was great, but there wasn't that many women that were good enough to really challenge her. And then it started to catch up with her, and now it's far surpassed her. That's right. What makes it exciting, because it was a lot like UFC 1, where you had Royce Gracie was really skilled and nobody else was. But then you bring Royce in to fight Matt Hughes a few years later, and Hughes finishes him in the first round.
With an armbar.
No, with a TKO. He went for the armbar, and
he finished Henzo with the armbar.
Henzo and Sakuraba. Is that the one you might be thinking of?
No, so Matt fought Royce, and then he fought Henzo, and I believe he finished Henzo with the armbar. I'm pretty sure. I might be wrong on that one, but I thought he finished one of them with a submission, and their reactions, I was just like, well, he beat us with our own move, so technically we're still great.
Well, that was Royce, that's for sure, because I was at that fight. I was cornering Chael when he fought, I think it might have been Jeremy Horn. And then the UFC would give you really terrible seats, but I had a backstage pass. So I just started working my way up. And so I was in the front row there watching Royce Gracie and Matt Hughes. And Matt did attempt a submission on Royce, but Royce would not tap, and then took his back and beat him until the referee had to stop it. And that was Royce's line was, yeah, you're beating me with jiu-jitsu, which is my game, so I'm still the winner.
So maybe that's what I'm thinking of then. Yeah, that must have been it. Because I clearly remember that line and just kind of like chuckling about it. Not when I'm at my buddy's house.
So one more question, and then we'll let you go. The last question here is a little bit of fantasy booking. Is there UFC fighters in all of history, if you could be there front and center to watch, who would you pair?
What fight would I want to see in person? Boy.
I mean, it could be a fighter from now against a fighter from back in the day. I mean, just if you were doing fantasy booking.
Okay. Shoot, if I was to put myself in that mix, and I got to say this to him too, I never really liked calling people out. Every time I did, it didn't work out so well for me. But I always thought fighting BJ Penn would be a good fight.
Oh man,
because
awesome.
And I'm technically bigger than BJ, but BJ fought at light heavyweight against Machida, and I believe went the distance with him. BJ would fight as light as 145 or as heavy as 205. He is just He's got that Hawaiian warrior spirit. And especially in his younger years, you could beat on him all day and he would not even show a mark. We trained together. He came to Portland and we trained together for a week. He was one of the most talented athletes I ever got the opportunity to roll with. And we sparred, and it was just rock'em sock'em robots. We're just blasting each other. And so he was a guest on my show back in 2012, and we went out afterwards and had a drink. And I said, BJ, I don't want to upset you or provoke you or anything, but I wanted to say, and I don't generally call people out, and I don't really think of fighting as too fun, but I always thought it would be fun to actually fight you, because I'm such a big fan and I'm friends with you that even if you won, I'd still be happy for you. And if I won, I'd be happy for me too. And blah, blah. And he looks at me and goes, brother, you are one of the last true warriors. And clinked our glasses together. And he said, look at the glasses. My glass is lower than yours. You are a true warrior. And he was just always one of my favorites. Just in watching him in the UFC while I was at home just watching the fights before I ever had any dreams of making it to the UFC was just phenomenal. And then to consider him a friend has been really cool.
That's awesome. And, I would have see that. That would have been great.
Yeah, that would have been a fight to remember for sure.
Yeah. So I want to really, really thank you for joining us. You have a very interesting story, and I'm glad that you shared it with us and talked some nerdy stuff. Before we let you go, we want you to have the spotlight. Why should people back your Kickstarter?
Well, my goal is just to get that story out there. And for $25, you get a copy of the graphic novel signed by me, shipped to your house. And you can escape from the remnants of 2020 and the craziness that has so far been 2021 and just disappear into the world of Zombie Cage Fighter for a little bit. And that's been my goal, to share my story and get some people out there to enjoy it as well. And every copy purchase means that I just get to print more copies of it and then get started on the sequel, which is going to be just as awesome.
That's awesome. Yeah, like I said, we can't wait to get our copy. We backed it. I believe we did the like $30 some odd tier that you have.
Nice. So you're getting a copy of issue 0 and then the graphic novel. Awesome. So you get the first appearance of Zombie Cage Fighter along with the graphic novel. Awesome.
Yeah. So what do you have coming up? Anything? Any appearances or?
Boy, this has been the big focus. And then with everything being shut down for 2020, we've got this 13-year-old baby running around the house. And as I get to say, that the good thing about the pandemic is we've got to spend every day with him. And the bad thing about the pandemic is we've had to spend every day with him. So it's been a busy year just with that. And just looking forward to more of this and getting past this craziness of the past year and moving forward in a more positive manner.
Well, I hope when conventions do open back up that you come out here to Florida. I would love to actually meet you in person.
Oh, I'd love it. Hell yeah.
Yeah, that'd be fantastic.
And if you ever make it up to Canada, please come to Winnipeg for our conventions too.
Oh, I'd love it. Tell your promoters to give me a call and bring me up. I'd love to. I love it.
If I have to buy the booth myself, I'll make sure I do it.
Well, thank you.
All right. Well, this has been fun. Omar, you have any podcast coming up for Creepshow?
Yeah, I'm gonna do one this weekend. Just kind of brushing up on some horror news, and it's just a general episode where I get to talk about all the current events. Those are the fun ones because I don't have to make up too much on the spot. I just kind of tell everyone what's going on and how excited I am for them.
Awesome. So where can people find this podcast?
So if you go on YouTube, it is The Creepshow Podcast. I should be the first one you see on there. It's usually just my face. So it's pretty easy to find. And yeah, please like and subscribe and let me know what you guys think in comments.
Well, Willow, what about you? You have any pillow talks coming up?
Oh, nothing planned just yet, but you guys can watch my show at Skylar Productions on Facebook. You can find me on Twitter. You can find me on Instagram. Find me on Twitch. and on YouTube as well.
And I got to say this. I love the Twitch name. What is that Twitch name again?
63 Beast. Because I'm a huge Beast fan. And I did not think that through at all.
Hey, no, that's cool, man. X-Men are X-Men, and you love Beast.
I mean, that is my favorite X-Men. So,
thank you.
All right, well, this has been episode 40 of Reels and Heels, and it's time, as always, to wrap.